I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
That was 7 years ago, and even after 2 impeachments, losing the presidency, the House, and the Senate for his party, the Access Hollywood take being found liable for sexual abuse and defamation, the former president has actually yet to face real accountability. And after today's 37-count indictment, he still has widespread support in his party. Here's Garrett Haake.
Tonight, an historic shakeup in the race for the White House. The Republican frontrunner, former President Trump, facing federal criminal charges. And now Mr. Trump getting backup from some of his Republican rivals. His top opponent, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, writing, quote, "The weaponization of federal law enforcement represents a mortal threat to a free society." And his former Vice President, Mike Pence, urging public patience but blasting the Department of Justice, calling it a sad day in America.
The day after a former president of the United States faces an unprecedented indictment by a Justice Department run by the current president of the United States and a political rival.
And this from GOP candidate Tim Scott.
What we've seen over the last several years is the weaponization of the Department of Justice against the former president.
And House Speaker Kevin McCarthy.
It goes to the core of equal justice for all, which is not being seen today, and we are not going to stand for it.
Few in the GOP criticizing Mr. Trump, though fierce Trump critic Chris Christie writing, "No one is above the law." Mr. Trump, who was seen on the golf course today, has politically survived multiple criminal investigations and being impeached and acquitted twice, and has been bracing for this moment, which would almost certainly derail most presidential campaigns.
Almost certainly derail most presidential campaigns. Let's bring in Symone Sanders Townsend, former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris and host of the show Symone on Peacock. Also, Jennifer Palmieri, former White House communications director for President Obama, now the co-host of Showtime's The Circus. Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee and former lieutenant governor of Maryland. Katie Benner is still with us. Thanks to all of you for being here. Katie, I wanted to ask you, as we were talking about this indictment, one of the talking points that Republicans have used from time to time is the degree to which Merrick Garland is somehow involved in this. Merrick Garland has done this. Why isn't Merrick Garland doing more? Some Democrats have complained about that. Just tell us how this played out. This is Jack Smith's game. Merrick Garland had certain latitude to stop Jack Smith from doing what he did if Jack Smith did certain things that were not in keeping with Justice Department policy. But short of that, Merrick Garland doesn't have a role in this.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point. So the moment that Jack Smith took over as a special counsel, Merrick Garland essentially ceded authority to him to run this investigation. He could say no to Jack Smith. He could say you can't indict. He could say you can't make this take this investigative step. But in doing so, he would then have to explain to Congress why he did that. And the only reason under the regulations that he's allowed to take that step is if Jack Smith were to basically violate Justice Department protocol. So you're right. Merrick Garland is very far away from this investigation. And one more quick thing, if you read through this indictment, it really comports with things that we heard in the reporting, and I heard even today from sources inside of the department. Keep in mind, when the Justice Department first heard about this, and you see this outlined, they got a referral from NARA in February of 2022. And initially, they did not think that this was going to be a big criminal matter. People do take classified records home with them after they leave the White House. This is not uncommon. And there was no reason initially to think that when they asked for them back, when NARA asked for them back, that they wouldn't get all of the documents. And in the reporting that we had, and you see this, a criminal investigation does not start for another, more than a month. And then they start to use the power of the grand jury to subpoena people, an indication that they weren't sure that they're going to get people to comply without subpoena power. And then you see more weeks go by before they actually subpoena the president. You see more weeks go by before they actually do the search warrant. And in that time, what I've reported out is that there was huge debate over whether or not they would have to take these steps. They were steps that people didn't want to take. We saw that in a Washington Post story. There was a lot of debate. But at the end of the day, prosecutors felt that in some ways Trump was not giving them a choice because it seemed to them, as they gathered more evidence, as they spoke with more people, that he wasn't being truthful. And so they just had to take these extraordinary measures. And you can actually see the skeleton of that in this indictment. This is not something that the Justice Department was gung-ho about. It wasn't even a case that they expected. It kind of came out of nowhere. But again, because of the president's own actions, they felt they needed to pursue this as a criminal matter.
Mr. Steele, at the end of what has been 2 extraordinary and extraordinarily long days, what's your take on all of this?
I come at it from a number of angles. I think the most important point is the one that was just made. We are here not because of what Joe Biden did or Hillary Clinton or even members of the Trump administration. It's what Trump did, his actions. So, you know, everybody in the Republican Party who's out here sort of, you know, mansplaining on behalf of Trump right now need to just shut up and recognize this is him. And so if you want to make excuses for his behavior, then say, look, you know, I'm just going to make excuses for his behavior, because the rest of us know that this doesn't happen unless he takes the documents. This doesn't happen unless when he's asked to return the documents, he refuses to do so. This doesn't happen unless, you know, upon refusing to return the documents, the government is required to issue a subpoena and then to come down to Mar-a-Lago and seize the documents. So this process unfolded right before our eyes. So lying to us about what this is just a waste of time. But now, having said that, it gets to I think one of the aspects of this that I'm really interested in watching, and that is the voir dire, the jury process. I don't trust Judge Cannon as far as I could toss her, because she's already shown her bias. She's already shown her particularity for Trump. Now, even with the smack on the hand, pretty severe smack on the hand by the 11th Circuit, I still believe there's more up her sleeve that she can play. And so that's part one of what to watch. And part two is how this jury comes together. All you need is one to say no. And if that one decides somehow gets through the cracks, pretending they're going to be objective, pretending they're going to observe the facts and apply the law to the facts, and that's not their mission, then we'll see an outcome here that I think will frustrate not just the American people, but most especially the rule of law.
Our friend is here, Simone. You've been on a lot of sides of this whole thing. You were the one who told me about how you can't take things like your own photograph out of the White House. What we heard from Kevin McCarthy here about there's 2 kinds of law. This is a thing we're hearing from Republicans, right? There's not the same law being applied to everybody. There's 2 standards of the law. Vivek Ramaswamy said something like this. At what juncture, and what does anyone politically who can read a document have to explain to people that just read the document? It's all in here. There's no, what Mike Pence's documents and Joe Biden's documents bear no resemblance to what this is.
You know, I made a note, Allie, that my second point that I'm sending to my team tonight for my show tomorrow is that Donald Trump was planning all along to keep and regularly kept documents that were confidential and or highly classified while he was president. How do we know? Well, if you go to the first page, honey, page 1 to page 2 of the indictment, y'all don't even got to read far. It is what it says in the first paragraph. It talks about the boxes that Donald Trump kept as president, and that he directed the moving of those boxes as his presidency wound down. And then obviously the indictment goes through and details in much color the movement of those boxes at Mar-a-Lago. To me, that says that Donald Trump knew. Donald Trump knew what the boxes were at his home, unlike Joe Biden and Mike Pence. President Biden and former Vice President Pence did not direct the moving of boxes. To my knowledge, Vice President Pence nor then Vice President Biden kept boxes of information in their residences that they regularly cataloged and moved them. And that is the difference here. I think this really all boils down to 2 things. The fact that Donald Trump was regularly sloppy with his, the way he handled classified documents and the conversations he had about classified documents while he was president. But the power of the presidency protected him from being held accountable. Well, what Donald Trump and I think the people around the former president failed to realize was after he left the presidency, he no longer had that protection, but yet the sloppiness of which he handled classified information, he shouldn't even have had it in the first place.
Right.
And the conversation he had around that was still the same. It was his carelessness and his arrogance that brought us to this point here. And that carelessness is central to what is in the indictment. Again, I encourage people to read the story. I think Ali Velshi is hopefully going to get us a dramatic reading of this.
I'm going to.
But it is that carelessness and that arrogance and that sloppiness that is quite dangerous, because every single day the leaders of our country make decisions oftentimes based on the kind of documents that Donald Trump had in his possession.
Right.
And the way in which those documents are gathered, oftentimes how you got the information is the most important, is sometimes the most sensitive piece of that information.
Right.
People can be killed.
Yes.
That is going to the heart of this. And so I know there'll be lots of hemming and hawing about, oh, it's just papers and this and that. But at the end of the day, there is much detail here. And Donald Trump himself, if you believe the indictment as I do and you read it, Donald Trump himself knew that he shouldn't have the documents. He talks about it in conversation. Donald Trump himself knew he needed to try and conceal this information. It's why he had the conversations he had with his lawyers at the time. Donald Trump knew he had to mislead the people from the FBI and the archives and the Department of Justice. It's why he went into a meeting on June 3rd and said, I'm an open book.
Jen Palmieri, we could say all day, just read the 49 pages, but Kevin McCarthy is not telling people to read those 49 pages. He doesn't want them to.
Correct.
Talk to us about the politics of this, because right now, right-wing media is not covering this, saying, let's read line by line. Let's talk about the Department of Justice. They're saying Mike Pence, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, look the other way. How is this going to play out in Republican circles in real time?
So I think in the short term, this might be a short-term boom for Trump, mostly because he's just blotting out the sun, right? No one's going to be able to get any sort of attention. And after the last indictment, we saw that there was a rally-like effect and people rallied around Trump. You know, Sarah Longwell from the Republican Accountability Project regularly does focus groups with Trump voters. And after the first indictment, she found every single person in the focus group for the first time ever since doing them said that they would now support Trump. And even people who had been skeptical of him as a general election nominee, thinking someone like DeSantis might be better, even those people, they were just so mad about it that they rallied to his side. And so, you know, look, that indictment is devastating. And I think with independent voters and with some Republicans, it is going to be very jarring to them. Those people probably weren't going to vote for Trump anyway. And what's so wild to me and also distressing because it's so corrosive for the democracy is the argument that Republicans like Ron DeSantis and Kevin McCarthy, even Governor Youngkin in Virginia, are making to defend Trump. They're enabling him in two really dangerous ways. One, they continue to enable him and not hold him accountable for anything he does. That's why he continues to be Teflon. That's why he can say what he said about shooting somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue. But the other thing that's really corrosive is that the argument they say is that there's a two-tiered justice system, that it's all rigged. They never in any way suggest that he should be culpable for what he's doing. They're saying that this is all unjust. And that is really dangerous for the democracy. That's why people think, well, you know, Joe Biden probably committed a crime and because he had documents and he's not being held accountable. These same people think, well, Hillary, you know, there was a special counsel appointed under Trump who investigated Hillary Clinton for 5 years and didn't find anything. And they think, well, that's because it was under the Biden Justice Department. There's always they're setting it up. They're perpetuating Trump's power because they are forgiving in advance anything he may do because they say all of it is unjust. So how is Ron DeSantis actually ever going to make the argument that these indictments are too much, that Trump is not a good general election nominee if he's constantly creating a permission structure that says everything, anytime you see Trump being attacked, it's weaponization of the federal government and this is rigged and it's all unjust. You're making him a martyr, and that's not great if you're trying to make him your opponent.
But of course,
it's great it's bad for DeSantis. It continues to be great for Donald Trump.
In the case of Hillary Clinton, Jim Comey said they would not have been able to prove intent. And the thing we have to keep asking ourselves about Donald Trump, why? would any person go through this huge legal problem, this huge legal expense, this reputational issue, just to hold on to this information unless you are using it for some sort of leverage?
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Because the stuff he kept was not interesting reading for the sake of being interesting reading. For
it
a guy
wasn't
who
even the
doesn't
type
study
of vanity
policy.
things that you'd want to have as
The
memorabilia.
letter from somebody, something from the Pope, something from the Queen. It wasn't that.
It's a national security issue.